woman leading the case against it. The Ministry of Education halts plans to remove 700 tonnes of asbestos from an Auckland school, and Northland locals say they've had a guts full of marauding youngsters and they claim the police can't cope. We speak to the police about that and they say they really are trying their hardest. All of that and more, a busy checkpoint after the news at 5.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The defence lawyer for a man accused of murdering a 15-month-old boy is blaming the mother. Troy Taylor's on trial at the High Court in Christchurch for assaulting and murdering Ihaka Stokes in 2015. He was the partner of the toddler's mother, Michaela Stokes. Outlining the defence case, Philip Shammy told the jurors that before they decide whether Troy Taylor was responsible, they first had to be satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt it wasn't Ms Stokes who inflicted the injuries.
On that Friday, there were 2 people in the house, but for about 3.5 hours, it was only Ms Stokes, a heavily pregnant young woman with a child with an ear infection.
Philip Shammy reminded the jurors to put aside their emotions in weighing up the evidence in the case after they were shown a photo of an unconscious and heavily bruised Ihaka Stokes. The government will ask an advisory group that's part of the Land and Water Forum to investigate the questions around exporting water and the way water is currently allocated. Water rights campaigners presented a 15,000 signature petition to Parliament last week, calling for a moratorium on water exports. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says the government is responding to that public concern.
As it happens, we've got a group in place dealing with a lot of related issues around water. So that makes it easy to specifically ask them to look at this one.
Bill English says no moves will be made to charge companies for water before the election. The Accident Compensation Commission is making $4 million a year running the car park at Middlemore Hospital. Parking fees at the hospital are under fire after the father of a premature baby started a petition calling for the $20 fee for 4 hours or more to be scrapped. Edward O'Driscoll reports.
Alex Dexter spent hundreds of dollars on parking in a matter of days while visiting his prematurely born son. His petition has gained almost 16,000 signatures. The county's Manukau District Health Board owns the car park land, but says it doesn't receive any financial benefit. ACC has the car parking concession contract and says the fees are determined within the contract set by the DHB. It says the revenue helps cover the costs of ACC clients' treatment and rehabilitation. The Middlemore Hospital car park is the only car park that ACC runs. This is Edward O'Driscoll.
One of the accused in a violent kidnapping case wept when an Auckland jury returned its verdicts this afternoon. Nicola Jones and Julianne Torrance have been found guilty of attempted murder. They had earlier admitted charges of kidnapping. Michelle Blom and Cameron Hakeke have been found guilty of kidnapping. The jurors deliberated for 5.5 hours. As the verdicts were delivered, Hakeke wept uncontrollably. The 4 are due to be sentenced next month. The victim told the court she was kidnapped on 2 occasions, assaulted with weapons and had her hair cut before she was sexually violated. She was then driven to a remote road in the Dome Valley north of Auckland, where she was found with severe head injuries in May last year. The Education Ministry has stopped asbestos removal work at an Auckland school after worried parents protested. Contractors recently discovered old piping containing asbestos behind Hobsonville Primary School, and preparation work to remove 700 tonnes of contaminated soil around the pipes began today. The parents of about 40 children refused to send them to school today, complaining of conflicting information about the possible risks from the work. A ministry spokeswoman, Kim Shannon, says they've listened and have halted work until more details are provided. One parent, Nicola Marsh, says they didn't send their children to school because no one could agree on whether there was a risk.
We haven't been given many answers. The information we have been given is contradictory, I would say. The school's advised us that there's no risk, and we've been told that the children will be safe, but then on the other hand, the asbestos removal expert has also said that there's a risk.
Natalie Marsh. The Health Ministry says it's working urgently to see if a drug linked to birth defects in Britain has been used in this country. Britain's Guardian newspaper says the UK drugs regulator is examining a pregnancy test used in the 1960s and 70s, which hundreds of parents believed caused serious deformities in their children, often leading to early death. It concerns the hormonal drug Primidos, which was withdrawn in the UK in 1978. The Health Ministry says along with MedSafe, it takes any indications a medicine may have caused serious adverse effects extremely seriously. Police divers are on their way to Kaikoura to help find a missing diver. The Kaikoura Coast Guard says the 55-year-old man was reported missing about 7 o'clock last night. His spear gun and catch bag have since been found. It's 5:05. To sport, and the New Zealand batsman Ross Taylor has been ruled out of the third cricket test against South Africa, failing to recover from a calf injury in time. However, frontline pace bowler Trent Boult is likely to play. Both were injured in the drawn first test in Dunedin and missed the 8-wicket second test defeat to the Proteas at the Basin Reserve. Despite the humiliating defeat, selector Gavin Larson says the squad will remain unchanged for the series decider in Hamilton, which starts on Saturday.
Bolty's work in progress, so we're confident that we can get Bolty onto the park for day one. So he had a bowl yesterday. I understand he came through that pretty well. Obviously he's being monitored very closely, and it'll then just be a day-by-day proposition.
The Seddon Park wicket is expected to turn, with left-arm spinner Mitchell Santner likely to replace either of the all-rounders Jimmy Neesham or Colin de Grandhomme. New Zealand golfer and world number 1 Lydia Ko has finished in a tie for 8th at the Founders Cup on the LPGA Tour after a final round 4 under 68. Sweden's Anna Nordqvist won the tournament by 2 shots. That's the news.
Kaikohe youth gone wild.
The solution is to put corporal punishment back into our schools, and people won't like this, the do-gooders won't like this.
Charging water bottlers? Don't hold your breath.
Well, you have to answer an awful lot of difficult questions before you can get to that stage.
105 metres down in Lake Taupo. Dave Mullen's record-breaking dip.
Cold and dark, it's pretty much pitch black, and you're getting frozen as well as squeezed.
News in depth. Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then after 9, news as it happens. In-depth conversations with world-leading experts and the latest trends you need to know about. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, cloudy periods and the odd shower. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine. Waikato to Wellington, including Taumaranui and Taihape, also wide and upper. Cloudy periods, isolated showers, mainly from Taranaki northwards, clearing tomorrow morning. Nelson and Marlborough, fine today. Cloudy periods tomorrow with a few showers, mainly about the ranges. Canterbury, fine today. Occasional light rain or drizzle tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain or showers, clearing Fiordland overnight. Otago and Southland, showers spreading north today, then mostly clearing tomorrow, but light rain or drizzle remaining in North Otago and Dunedin. West or southwest gales in exposed places, easing later today. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and the odd shower. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you so much, Katrina. A busy program tonight. A pregnancy testing drug and its alleged link to birth defects at the end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s. Water and the government's move to respond to the growing controversy around being able to commercially bottle it for free. This is just breaking. And policing in Northland, a simple question: do they have enough cops? But first, the verdicts in the Dome Valley trial. These have just come out too. A 19-year-old woman survived being throttled, a concerted attempt to break her neck and at least 10 hammer blows to the head. Today, those responsible for 2 separate kidnappings, attempted murder and sexual assault were convicted of the vast majority of the charges they faced. At the High Court in Auckland, Nicola Jones and Julianne Torrance were both found guilty of attempted murder. The teenage victim was kidnapped and held captive for nearly a day in the basement of a West Auckland home in May of last year. The 12 jurors heard details during the 3-week trial of violent assaults with a taser, scissors and a cricket bat on the victim, who can't be named and has had to learn to walk and speak again with the help of a therapist. The jury deliberated for a little over 5 hours, delivered its verdict this afternoon. Joining us now on the phone is Crown Prosecutor Brian Dickey. Brian, welcome to Checkpoint and congratulations on the verdict. Multiple charges, multiple defendants. 5 hours is quite a quick response from the jury, isn't it?
Good evening, John. How are you? Of course, they didn't start till nearly till a little after 10 this morning, and they don't deliberate over lunch, so it was quite a quick response.
What was the weight of the evidence? What enabled the jury to return these guilty verdicts so quickly?
Look, probably the quality, notwithstanding the injuries suffered by the complainant, of her evidence, in that while she couldn't give, because of the nature of what happened to her, both physically in the sense of her injuries and the way she was held captive, a complete account of all events as clearly as other parts. She did nonetheless give a very good narrative of what had occurred and mostly who had done what, subject to some qualifications about what happened in the basement of a particular address where she was more compromised in her ability to say who had done what. So probably the quality of her evidence and a very good police investigation from the Orewa CIB and a collection of other witnesses and circumstantial evidence as well. But look, I think the complainant's the hero of the piece, John.
Yes, she was a remarkable witness and a remarkable woman to have survived this. And some of the testimony that we've heard over the past 3 weeks included the fact that she was privy to the discussion about the fact that they were going to murder her and that they would hide her body in a place where it would never be found. She overheard those discussions. So not only was she subjected to tremendous, horrendous physical abuse, but the psychological trauma she's been through defies understanding, really.
Look, she was held at that address in that basement for between 22 and 22 hours. She was assaulted in many ways, seriously and in degrading ways, through that period or during that period or parts of that period, and heard the sorts of conversations you just referred to, and then was put in the back of a truck tray and driven 50 minutes north of Auckland, thinking the worst was going to happen, and having that confirmed to her when she got there. So, yeah, it's not just the physical violence, there's an immense psychological violence as well. Yeah.
And a degree of premeditation. There was 2 kidnappings. She was held for a prolonged period and then they drove her with the view of killing her and hiding her body, which you would expect as Crown Prosecutor would be reflected in sentencing, right?
Yeah, look, they've been convicted of some very serious charges. I mean, attempted murder, that's literally been convicted of intending to kill her. That intent seemingly formed, well, that's a matter for sentencing, but the evidence you've identified suggests that plan was contemplated at the address before they left.
How did she survive? If she had, 10 hammer blows to the head, a concerted attempt to throttle her, how on earth did she survive it? And why, given the stated and explicit determination to kill her and hide the body, didn't they do so in the end? Did they think she was dead?
The evidence suggests, well, it's a matter for the court on sentencing, but there's evidence to suggest that they thought she was dead when they left her. There's also some evidence to suggest that they thought they'd better get moving at the point that they did get moving. But she was effectively left for dead. She would have given very little, if any, outward signs of the fact that she was still alive. You'd had to have tested that to know it. And why did she survive? People die in circumstances which shock us, surprise us, and people survive remarkably. She had compound fractures to her skull that were very severe. But it's actually the reason she survived is an incredible neurosurgical team at Auckland Hospital is the reason she survived. Remarkable surgeons.
Yeah, incredible story. Sentencing yet to come. Brian Dickey, who was the Crown Prosecutor that obtained those guilty verdicts and almost, certainly the vast majority of the charges. Thank you for joining us. That's just broken this afternoon. The verdicts, I think, came back after 4 o'clock. It's 40 minutes past 5. You are with Checkpoint. on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. We're going to turn now to the drug Primidos and claims coming out of the UK that it was responsible for an unknown number of birth defects in the 1960s and 1970s. Now, this is being strongly reported in the UK, but Bayer, the German pharmaceutical company that owns Schering, who manufactured the drug, emphatically denies the claim. Much is in dispute. But Checkpoint has learned that the drug was prescribed in New Zealand and was withdrawn here in 1975. Interestingly, that's 3 years before it was withdrawn in the UK. An article from the New Zealand Herald in June 1975 refers to an increasing amount of evidence linking it with birth defects. A man called Dr. D.A. Andrews from the Health Department is quoted as saying there had been quite a number of reports associating the use of pregnancy testing drugs. These are drugs you took to find out if you were pregnant with fetal abnormalities. Now, that was 42 years ago. But now a Sky News investigation has reasserted those links. And a group action is underway led by the Association for Children Damaged by Hormone Pregnancy Tests. This morning, very late in England, very late on Sunday night in England, we managed to get hold of its chairperson, Marie Lyon, before she went to bed. She says it took years for her to realise Primidos may have been the reason that her daughter Sarah was born in 1970 with part of a limb missing.
At the time, we were told that these things happen, so you get on with things. And it was only when she was 8 years of age that I found out that it was to do with the tablets that the doctor gave me to find out if I was pregnant. So that was quite a shock. I agreed to join the association that was trying to fight to find the truth about these drugs, and that was in 1978. We then had litigation in 82, but unfortunately, because of the might of the drug company and the fact that our experts suddenly started to kind of, be sponsored by Schering or find another job that they couldn't actually appear, we had to actually stop the litigation. So it was only back in 2009 that we restarted the organisation. And then in 2012, I agreed to become chair. So that's kind of a timeline of what happened.
And I'm just reading the Robert Booth article in The Guardian. It seems from that article anyway that the breakthrough was your discovery of 31 files of documents about the drug in a state archive in Berlin. What did you find?
Wow, it was a revelation because there were letters in there from Schering's lawyers, and the lawyers were basically asked the question, do you think we'll be found guilty? And the answer was yes. Why would we be found guilty? Because you hadn't done enough. You were aware that there were problems with the original testing. So that was quite a shock. It was also a shock to find out that initially the drug had been manufactured as an abortifacient, and yet they were using that as a pregnancy test.
Can I interrupt there? Because when it was described to me, it sounded incredibly like the morning after pill. How did it tell you you were pregnant? What did it do?
This is what we've never understood. All that we were told was that the hormones, this was later, remember, when we actually took the tablets, we were never given any information. We were just told it was a test, it wasn't therapy, and it would be a quicker way to find out if you were pregnant. So the initial thing when we finally found out that the components were 40 times the strength of an oral contraceptive, our first question was, well, how on earth can that work? Because the contraceptive stops you being pregnant. And we were told that the increase in hormones, if you weren't pregnant, would then bring on a period. If you were pregnant, it would not harm the baby. They were quite adamant on that.
And in fact, one of the documents that I think you discovered, Sky is reporting this, and I quote, says, no toxicology had been carried out before introduction either in Germany or the UK?
Perfectly correct.
So they were giving you something which sounds, on the face of it, incredibly like the morning after pill. It induces...
It does indeed, yes.
And there had been no toxicology work to understand the extent of its impact on the fetus?
None. Incredible, isn't it?
It boggles my mind. And yet there is still... And look, this is meant to be a dispassionate interview, so I'm going to rein myself in here, but the drug company itself still denies the cause and effect.
Of course they do. Of course they do. They have to do because they've denied this now for more than 40 years. And the reason that they initially denied it was because the same components are in the oral contraceptive pill. Now, the oral contraceptive pill was having massive problems around the 66, 67 time. And, of course, to then, let the public find out that there was another drug on the market that could also cause problems would have got women to stop taking the oral contraceptive. They couldn't afford to do that. That was the biggest selling tablet that they had. And it was Shearings that produced the oral contraceptive and Shearings that produced Primidos.
Okay.
So it's so closely linked.
Okay. And of course, some people listening to this are going to say conspiracy theory. In that cache of documents that you found, all those documents you found in Berlin, were there documents? Is there material to substantiate your theory that in fact they were preserving brand reputation?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. It's quite apparent in the text of the letters, in the way that they try to defend through their solicitor, in the fact that they actually colluded with the Government Health Agency in the UK and with the Government Health Agency in Germany. Now, Germany, the Government Health Agency was called the BGA, and they actually are on record as saying, we are advocates for shearing. Can you please send us documents that do not show abnormalities when using Primidos?
Who gave it to you? Your GP gave it to you. Did he or she?
He.
Okay. And so did you simply want to know if you were pregnant?
Well, yes. I mean, I just expected a urine test. My feeling is that GPs, you see, they were given 25,000 samples, and they were incentivised to give those samples out. Now,
hold on a sec. Do you know that? So they were incentivised in what way?
Well, each time that they gave out some of the tablets, they were incentivised with a reward, either remunerated through money or, as you know, with the pharmaceutical companies, they still remunerate today for certain drugs.
Okay, so in the normal course of events, and I think many of our listeners will know this, if you want to find out you're pregnant, you take it, you just pee on that little strip thing, right?
You do.
Okay,
yes.
But your GP gave you this new drug. Did he tell you that there were risks? Did he tell you what it was?
No, didn't even explain what they were. Just said this is the way that you find out if you're pregnant. It was my first pregnancy, so I genuinely would not have had an idea whether that was right or not.
And this is also at the same time or just after thalidomide, right?
That's what makes it even worse, because thalidomide was a therapeutic tablet for morning sickness. There was a purpose, even though it obviously was the wrong thing to give to women. There was a purpose to it. With Primidos, it was purely a test. It made money, a lot of money. It saved doctors time, saved the government expense, because they didn't have to go through, the frog thing where you had to go inject the liquid and then go back and see your doctor. So it was obviously very cost-effective for the government and made a lot of money for the drug company.
So what happens now? Because you are in dispute with a big pharmaceutical company, and they will have a legal team the size of a small country, right? Where do you go to from here?
Well, they might have that legal team, but I feel that we've got right on our side. And, my feeling is that the facts we have are indisputable. Now, they will fight, and I know that because they fought hard in 1982, and I believe they spent about £1.5 million on their defence. We had legal aid, so you can just imagine the difference. But, they're prepared to fight because they're prepared not to have to admit that they actually went to the lengths that they went to actually cover this up.
Okay. Your association, do you have members in New Zealand? Have you heard from anyone in New Zealand?
No, we haven't. And I think, again, the horrible thing is that since this has started to become more in the public domain, we've had so many women ringing through to say, oh, my goodness, this happened to me and I thought it was my fault. And I think with New Zealand, again, unfortunately, there was a huge sales team in every country. And again, it could be that, these things were suppressed even in New Zealand because there is no way that your government, health authorities, would have, as is quoted, forced shearings to take it off the market unless there was some sort of evidence that people in your country had also been affected. Now remember, it can also cause miscarriages and stillbirths. So many, many women will have thought that they just, very unhappily either miscarried or the baby was stillborn and there's no explanation.
Maria Lyon, who took Primidos whilst she was pregnant and as part of a class action against the drug company Bayer, who strongly and emphatically deny cause and effect. MedSafe declined all requests for an interview today. Its manager, Chris James, says they are working through archives to establish its use. And we've sent a list of questions to Bayer regarding the use of drugs and the sale dates in New Zealand. It's yet to get back to us. But a short time ago, MedSafe's manager, Chris James, gave us this statement. Primidos first appeared in New Ethicals in 1969, suggesting it was available and prescribed in New Zealand from that time. In May 1975, the then Department of Health issued a clinical services letter advising that it was withdrawing systemic hormonal testing preparations for pregnancy testing from the New Zealand market. It did not specifically identify Primidos. There's no information on how many patients were prescribed this product. MedSafe has contacted Bayer to obtain information if it's available. Checkpoint has also asked Bayer for the same information. If you think that you took Primidos in the late 60s or early 70s, we'd really love to hear from you. Text us 2101. Email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. 5:20. A jury has heard a man lost it and killed a 15-month-old boy due to the effects of the repeated concussion injuries he suffered. Troy Taylor is on trial at the High Court in Christchurch for assaulting and murdering Ihaka Stokes in 2015. Conan Young was in court, and a warning: some listeners may find some of Conan's story disturbing.
Troy Taylor, who was 22 at the time, lived with Michaela Stokes and her son in their Brimwa home. Ms Stokes considered him to be a stepfather to her boy. In opening the Crown's case, lawyer Courtney Martin said a series of concussions left Mr Taylor struggling to sleep and with a short fuse. At the same time, baby Ihaka was not settling due to an ear infection.
It was this unfortunate combination, the Crown says, that no doubt led to the defendant losing it and causing Ihaka's death.
Courtney Martin said Mr Taylor claimed the injuries were caused by the boy banging his head against a wall and falling. But she said this was an attempt by Mr Taylor to cover up his role in causing the injuries, which were not accidental. She then put a photo up for the jury to see of a bruised and unconscious Ihaka Stokes and read out the toddler's post-mortem report.
Baby Ihaka suffered bruising to the forehead, right eye, left and right ear, to the scalp, behind the left ear, bruising to the right jawline, bruising over the tip of the right shoulder and both upper arms. He also had fracture of both shoulder blades, fracture of the left forearm, fracture of the jaw, and he also suffered head injuries. And these are comprised of a bilateral acute subdural hemorrhage, brain swelling and bilateral retinal hemorrhage.
The image was upsetting to a number of family members in the public gallery. One had to leave the court when it was displayed. Others shed tears and comforted each other. Referring to the photo, defence lawyer Phil Shammy reminded the jury to put aside their emotions in weighing up the evidence in the case.
The first issue is summarised in the photograph that you saw brought up on the screen of that young boy. These trials are horrible, and trust me, they don't get any easier. But prejudice and sympathy can have no place. This is a court of justice, not of emotion.
Mr Shammy then pointed the finger of blame at Ihaka Stokes' mother. He said before the jury decided whether Mr Taylor was responsible, it first had to be satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not Miss Stokes who inflicted the injuries.
On that Friday, there were 2 people in the house, but for about 3.5 hours, it was only Miss Stokes, a heavily pregnant young woman with a child who had an ear infection.
Michaela Stokes will be the first witness called by the Crown tomorrow. She will then be cross-examined by Mr Shammy. In Ōtautahi for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
A water industry group says bottling companies should not be taxed unless other industries are, but Water New Zealand says it's keen for a debate about tax on commercially bottled water. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has just announced the Land and Water Forum will investigate what he says is the highly complicated issue of these water exports. Bill English concedes the recent public interest is the reason the advisory group is being asked to take another look at this.
We haven't looked at it in great detail. All I can say is from our now 7 years of experience with dealing with water issues, it's always 5 times more complicated than you thought, and there's always a wide diversity of interests in what happens. That's why it took 7 years to get to be able to announce a quality framework. So you wouldn't want to underestimate the many issues that will arise in considering this particular issue.
Bill English talking just a short time ago. So that part of the story is breaking. A petition was presented to Parliament last week calling for a moratorium on the export of drinking water and asking for the government to follow Australia's lead and introduce a tax for water use. Jacob McSweeney reports.
Water New Zealand Chief Executive John Campbell says the question of taxing water was discussed in the Land and Water Forum in 2012. No resolution was reached and no recommendations were made. Mr Campbell says there isn't an easy solution to this.
For example, if you were to start charging dairy farmers, for example, or industrial users for water, you might then start affecting levels of investment in their sector, which would then affect the whole economy. So you need to think about it in that broader context. You can't simply look at it just as a water bottling, they're making money, we should charge them for it type argument.
John Campbell says there needs to be a broader conversation about taxing water more generally.
If you did make a quick fix just to tax water bottlers, you run the risk of treating them quite separately to everybody else, and I just don't think that's good public policy. We need to approach this on a principles issue and deal with it in a considered manner.
John Campbell says it's likely New Zealanders undervalue water resources because it is so efficiently delivered to households. Jen Branya is the founder of the Bung the Boar Action Group that wants a stop to bottled exports until all New Zealanders can make an informed decision on the topic. She says the Prime Minister has put the issue of taxing water bottle exporters in the too hard basket. Mrs Branya says the government only has to look across the Tasman to learn what a working example of taxing water users looks like.
It's been done in Australia, putting a price on water for industrial use. In actual fact, the models that have come out of there have shown that putting a value on water for agricultural use has actually made water use way more efficient and has contributed to the betterment of the waterways.
RNZ has put in calls to several water bottling companies requesting an interview and has had little response. Naturally Pure NZ said it would comment in a few weeks, while One Pure said it had not had a fair run in the news and wanted to control any messaging through its relationships with other media outlets. Coca-Cola Amatil is yet to respond to requests, and the Beverage Council, which represents a number of different brands, failed to return calls. For Checkpoint, Core Jacob McSweeney, Tēnei.
Coming up on Checkpoint, Northland locals say they've had a guts full of what they're calling marauding youngsters, and they say the police can't cope. We talked to the police. The Ministry of Education halts plans to remove 700 tonnes of asbestos from an Auckland school. The concussion debate has reignited after 2 incidents the week when rugby league players continue to play despite suffering serious and obvious head injuries. An extraordinary state of affairs. Known is going to talk about Fletcher Building, a big markdown on their profit expectations. But before all of that, Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The defence lawyer for a man accused of murdering a 15-month-old boy says the jury needs to be sure the boy's mother was not responsible for his injuries. Troy Taylor is on trial in the High Court in Christchurch for assaulting and murdering Ihaka Stokes in 2015, and his lawyer has been told the jury they need to be sure beyond reasonable doubt who was to blame. The Accident Compensation Corporation is making $4 million a year running the car park at Middlemore Hospital. Parking fees at the hospital are under fire after the father of a premature baby called for the $20 fee for 4 or more hours to be scrapped. The government is to take a close look at the exporting of water and the way water is currently allocated. The Prime Minister, Bill English, this afternoon announced that an advisory group will investigate water sales after concerns raised by water rights campaigners. The Crown prosecutor in a kidnapping trial that's just come to an end in the High Court in Auckland says the victim is a true hero of the prosecution. Brian Dickey has told Checkpoint the quality of her evidence ensured that the 4 people involved were all found guilty. 2 women have been found guilty of attempted murder and all 4 have been found guilty of kidnapping. The Health Ministry is working urgently to see if a drug linked to birth defects in Britain has been used in this country. Britain's Guardian newspaper says the UK drugs regulator is examining a pregnancy test used in the 1960s and 70s, which hundreds of parents believe caused serious deformities in their children, often leading to early death. The Education Ministry has stopped asbestos removal work at an Auckland school after protests from worried parents. 700 tonnes of contaminated soil is about to be removed from the back of Hobsonville Primary School after old piping containing asbestos was found behind school buildings. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. This is fast unfolding, that Primidos situation. We have confirmed it was indeed used here in the late 60s and early 70s. Nona, Fletcher Building, we're here to talk about business, but this is a very big story that you're going to address in some depth tonight. Fletcher Building, a sharp downgrade in its revenue expectations, its full year profit expectations. What on earth has happened?
Well, there's a number of different divisions within Fletcher Building. One of them, of course, is Fletcher Construction, and we've had a construction boom, as you know. Fletcher Construction has $2.7 billion of work on its books as of its full year ending in June. So that was a lot of work that they've got on their books and big construction projects. Part of their business involves a division within construction called Building and Interiors. And that particular piece of business is where the trouble is. That division, which accounts for about 55% of Fletcher Construction's business. So we've got Fletcher Building.
Yep, is the parent.
Yeah, Fletcher Construction. Then we've got the Building and Interiors business, which is a large business. It's got $1.5 billion of work on its books. And that's where they're having some trouble.
Fletcher Building gets a lot of government work.
They do.
Yep.
And they've got infrastructure, which is like roading and so on. And then they've got, this division, which is more concerned with, and I actually got a list here, we're talking about things like the International Convention Centre, which is just underway.
In Auckland.
Yeah, the Commercial Bay development in downtown Auckland, which is just starting. That's a big project as well. Those are Victoria University of Wellington Science Building is another one of theirs. They've got some work in the Christchurch Justice Precinct.
Huge role in the Christchurch rebuild.
Yeah, they've got the headquarters for Fonterra, the University of Auckland Science Building, big variety of things, University of Waikato Law School, and so on. So yeah, they've got a lot of projects within this division. And this is the division where they've uncovered the problems. So they've marked down their full year underlying operating guidance by $110 million. That's as much as 20% less than they were forecasting just 2 weeks ago.
In revenue terms?
This is profit.
Wow.
Yeah, underlying, this is bottom line profit. Underlying operating profit,
absolutely.
Not bottom line. So that's before other things, like tax and so on. So yeah, $110 million is significant, and it's embarrassing for the company as well. I mean, Mark Adamson, he spoke to us a couple of weeks ago when they did their financial result for the first half, and he thought at that time that they could make up that difference in their full year underlying operating profit, and they didn't revise it because they thought, well, at that time they thought that the losses that they incurred was on one project in the order of tens of millions of dollars. Now they're saying it's not just one project, it's 2 major projects and some smaller ones. So, of course, we've heard from the New Zealand Shareholders Association today. They're really unhappy. They're actually looking at why the chief executive is still in the job. But the chief executive said it in earlier today. He talked about a number of things that they have taken. They've taken steps to address certain issues. For example, in management, they've made some changes there. They've also introduced some tougher guidelines in terms of governance and financial controls. And here's what the chief executive, Mark Adamson, said earlier today in a presentation to analysts and media.
We are finding the costs associated with the extension of project timelines and increases in project resources are far greater than previously expected. The extent of this has become more apparent as our review has progressed since the half-year announcement. We have made and are continuing to make changes to the construction governance processes and personnel, which is enabling us to clearly identify and address project performance issues. We believe these changes will drive improvement in future periods' performance. However, there is no escaping the fact that this is a very disappointing outcome, and the review has found much weaker performance than we previously expected. It is regrettable that only a few weeks ago we were standing in front of the market talking about a smaller loss in the business unit on one project.
And so that's the chief executive of Fletcher Building, Mark Adamson. Now, they're considering other options to be compensated. It's not just internal. There were some external issues as well, and they're reviewing that. Meanwhile, they're just focusing on getting these jobs done. Their share price fell as much as 13% this morning, and that was after their trading halt was lifted. So, but they improved a little bit through the day. They fell 10%. That's 94 cents to $8.28. That compares with $9.22 on Friday when they put in that trading halt.
This is highly unusual, this kind of stuff. And Mark Adamson, I was in that grab you just played us, he described it as regrettable.
Yeah.
That is somewhat of a droll understatement, isn't it?
I'll say. So, yeah.
And actually a 13% adjustment of market value by the share market is perhaps slightly smaller than one might have expected.
Well,
and does it reflect the fact that Fletcher Building still get a hell of a lot of work?
They do, and I guess because they've taken a number of measures to address the issues, they feel like they've contained their problem. Perhaps the market it's a big company, right?
Yeah, it is.
Lots of construction projects, so maybe they can make things up later on. After all, they do have to take account of losses when they become aware of them, whether or not they are in fact realized at this stage. They're on the books, though. Anyhow, that did have an impact on our market overall. It fell 1.4% today. That's by 101 points to 7,057, of course, reflecting that Fletcher Building fall. But not just that, the markets generally have been a bit unsettled following the G20 meeting where the finance ministers failed to come up to agreement to ensure free trade. Protectionism is creeping in. There was that testy meeting there between Donald Trump and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. So the dollar strengthened a bit to 78.4 US cents, 91.1 Australian and 56.8 pence.
Nona Peltier, business reporter here in Auckland at the end of a fascinating day. Thanks so much, Nona. Let's head from Auckland north. Northland police are defending their handling of a youth crime spree in Kaikohe at the weekend. So far they've made just one arrest after a gang of youngsters raided a liquor store and a larger group attacked the doors of the town's mobile service station. Locals say they've had a gutsful of the marauding youngsters and claim the police are too stretched to cope. Lois Williams reports.
Deepak Singh, who works at the Shed liquor store in Kaikohe, says he's now used to being robbed by kids. It's happened repeatedly and twice in the last 3 months. All he can do is shout at the young thieves in hoodies who hunt in packs and make lightning raids on his beer stocks. But it's frightening, he says, and sales are down because the thieves also hit on his customers.
The kids again, like 4 or 5 kids, they try to stop our customer and ask them for the beers what they bought from the shop, and they just try to steal from our customers.
On Friday night, the youngsters got away with 4 boxes of beer, which they carried off to an adult party. And later that night, a mob of about 20 did their best to smash their way into the Ngāpuhi-owned mobile service station. It's been hit 5 times in 18 months. This time the glass doors held, but the boys did about $1,000 worth of damage. Tony Taylor, who runs the Kaikohe Community Patrol, says it happens all the time, and the police are generally out of town, dealing with mayhem elsewhere.
We're trying to help the police. We're trying to get across to the police minister, say, hey, this is not acceptable. We need help for these officers in town. Now, I don't know whether the police are going to duck, shove or do whatever, but the bottom line is they haven't got enough people on the ground when it counts.
Inspector Al Simon says he had 11 officers working across the Mid-North on Friday night, but the police were expecting St Patrick's Night havoc in the busy bars of Paihia and Kerikeri and focusing on those towns, not on Kaikohe.
Obviously, we didn't expect what was happening in Kaikohe, but to put it in context, perhaps, the mobile event, we had a staff member there within 3 minutes of the call, and we have apprehended one of those offenders, and it's a small town, so we are confident that we'll find most of them, if not all of them.
But a Kaikohe businessman, Steve Sangster, says that's the problem. Police are continually on the back foot in the north, reacting to crime instead of preventing it. He says that's because there are simply not enough of them around in places like Kaikohe to act as a deterrent. And while the police station on Broadway looks imposing, it's often deserted.
You know, we have a police station, but yesterday when I needed the police, there was nobody at the station, and surely in a town like Kaikohe with a reasonable population, there should be people there, should be manned at all times, within reason, of course. It just seems that, you know, the station is there, but the people are not apparent.
Frustration over youth crime in Kaikohe has prompted the local National Party chair, Alan Price, to suggest a return to corporal punishment. But the principal of Northland College, where 2 boys involved in the weekend rampage are pupils, says that would never work. Jim Luders says Kaikohe's main problem is a lack of jobs, closely followed by drug abuse.
A lot of these kids have really tough lives, and what they actually need is some care and some understanding and lots of love. And I know people think, no, you should be doing the opposite, but the reality is they're at a vulnerable age, and if they get the proper support from the agencies, that's going to help them to get on the right path and the right way.
But are the police understaffed in the north? Inspector Al Simon's answer is diplomatic.
If we have more staff, we can do more. We have to concentrate on doing the best with what we do have.
For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
And we'll look at that in some more after 6. The Ministry of Education has pulled the plug on plans to remove 700 tonnes of asbestos-contaminated soil from an Auckland school. Contractors discovered old piping containing asbestos behind the Hobsonville Primary School during development of a new pick-up and drop-off area in November of last year. Parents were worried after plans were made to remove the soil during school hours. About 40 decided not to send their children to school today. This has prompted the school and the ministry to halt plans. Sally Murphy reports.
Natalie Marsh kept her 2 young children away from school today as preparation work at the contaminated site began.
This whole situation has caused a great deal of stress and anxiety for myself and a lot of other concerned parents. So the whole situation I find astounding.
The school's handled it pretty badly, do you think?
I definitely would have to agree with that.
Miss Marsh says the school held a meeting with the asbestos removers in February so parents could ask questions. But she says parents are confused over conflicting information and unclear of the risk to their children.
We haven't been given many answers. The information we have been given is contradictory, I would say. The school's advised us that there's no risk, and we've been told that the children will be safe. But then on the other hand, the asbestos removal expert has also said that there's a risk.
Miss Marsh wrote to the Health Minister, Michael Woodhouse, with her concerns in February. In a written response, the Minister said WorkSafe had assured him that no work would be undertaken within school hours. Daryl Montgomery, Director of Asbestos Removal New Zealand, cannot understand why the decision was made for the removal to be done whilst children were around. He's had teachers and concerned parents calling him to ask questions.
Why hasn't there been more information that's been given them to sort of clarify exactly what is going on, what they should expect from the removal process, and give them some sort of comfort and understanding of what the safety precautions are that have been put in place and how they make it a safe environment.
WorkSafe introduced new guidelines for the management and removal of asbestos in November last year. Mr Montgomery says they're causing confusion.
There's a lot of lack of knowledge and understanding of what the risks are and how those can be offset. Again, because it's fairly recent, people are very, very much in the dark, and there's not enough information available for people to be able to make clear, defined choices about what to do with asbestos in sort of any kind of situation at the moment.
The Ministry of Education has requirements for asbestos removal. One is that asbestos removal does not happen during school hours. If it does, there needs to be rationale for the decision and approval from the Ministry. Hobsonville Primary and the Ministry of Education were unavailable for interviews today, but in a statement the Ministry's spokeswoman Kim Shannon said work at the school has been stopped, so more information can be provided to parents.
We would like to assure parents that we're confident that this work can be carried out safely. We will now review when the work goes ahead. The Easter school holidays is the next logical opportunity. We understand why the community would be cautious about the presence of asbestos. However, it is not unusual for asbestos removal projects to take place during school time.
The school's Board of Trustees Chair Lance Norman says the children's safety was always the priority in the decision to remove the contaminated soil during school time. He says many parents want the asbestos removed straight away, and 90% of students showed up to school today.
On hindsight's great, but the problem is we have a lot of parents saying, please get rid of that product right now, because we don't feel safe that that product's on site. And we have some parents saying, get rid of, leave that product in there and don't remove it. We have specialists saying, get rid of it right now. So the advice we've had prior to today was remove that product as safely and as quickly as possible.
Mr Norman says it will take 3 to 4 weeks to carry out the removal, and the next 4-week gap is in the Christmas holidays, so the school is looking at options. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
10.5 to 6 on RNZ. The Accident Compensation Commission is earning somewhere in the region of $4 million a year running the car park at Middlemore Hospital. Parking fees at the hospital are under fire after the father of a premature baby started a petition calling for the $20 fee for 4 or more hours a day to be scrapped. Alan Dexter started an online petition after spending $140 a week on parking to visit his premature firstborn son and his ailing wife. This is an unusual arrangement. The land at Middlemore belongs to the DHB. Charges for the car park were introduced roughly 15 years ago. In 2010, ACC took over the contract for the park, running it, maintaining it and expanding it in return for the revenue. Now, there are 25 free parks for the parents of sick children, and people receiving dialysis also park for free. But if it's not free, it's not cheap. Philip Barmer is the Director of Hospital Services for Counties Manukau DHB. I spoke to him a short time ago, and he defended the price of parking and the arrangement with ACC.
But to be fair, we also receive funding from ACC for rehabilitation, for injuries and for a range of other things. So I suppose it helps to support the role that ACC has in looking after injured patients.
OK, but you're not directly taking money from the car park and spending it on healthcare at Middlemore, are you? It's going actually into the ACC coffers, isn't it?
Absolutely. We would not receive that directly. We would receive it through the funding that ACC will provide for our patients.
And how much are ACC pulling out of your car park each year? About $4 million, is that correct?
I would not be precise. I think you'd need to talk to ACC about that.
OK, so you don't know
how much... There are operational costs, obviously. We have 24-hour security. We have significant infrastructure and maintenance of that infrastructure.
Philip, are you happy with $20 as the rate, which kicks in at 4 hours? After 4 hours, you pay $20 in a community which, in broad brushstroke terms, is low socioeconomic?
The belief that we have as a contract which was agreed and established, as I say, quite some time ago, as to the precise charging rates, I think that's something which would need to be discussed directly with ACC.
Isn't that a bit convenient? If it's your hospital, you are the Director of Hospital Services, you have given ACC the contract, ACC are making revenue out of this. Are you saying that what is being charged there is not your responsibility and not your concern?
What we undertook when we established the contract to commission the additional parking was a fee schedule that was part of an agreement that we established some time ago, back in 2010.
Right, so you agreed to these fees. So the hospitals agreed to these fees?
Absolutely. And again...
So if you'd agreed to the fees, why can't you answer my question without actually referring to and deferring to ACC? I want to know from you whether you think $20 for 4 hours in Middlemore, which is in a low socioeconomic community, is fair and reasonable.
My response, John, would be we are consistent with the $20 per day fee schedule, and we have...
Who else charges $20 per day after 4 hours?
After 4 hours, we would be charging, the daily rate would be $20 an hour for both Auckland and for Waitemata.
Right. I thought Waitemata was 18 after 7. You're 20 after 4.
So the rate that they would charge would be after 7 would be $20, yes. What we would be encouraging people to do would be to look at alternative forms of transport, public transport, Manukau Super Clinic and the shuttle bus, which is free. And again, we come back to the point, which is we have a fixed site with a good proportion of parking that's available for patients, but it is always going to be limited. So for us, anything we can do to reduce the congestion on this site would be sensible. So what we do in some instances is we provide free train tickets for patients who are attending to promote the awareness about that option. And we also provide detailed information to people when we're sending out about appointments about the parking, about the options that they could use for coming to the Minamore site.
Is your car park full every day?
No, it's not, but it is a very busy hospital site. We have got the busiest emergency department in New Zealand.
Right, but your ambulances aren't driving through your car park, are they? I mean, they're not dodging mum and dad coming to visit their child or somebody coming in for chemotherapy as they're going into emergency, are they?
We, as a result of having a very busy emergency department, also have a very busy hospital, and we do need to make sure that the parking is available for our patients and their family. And if we see the need, because of expressed need by patients or expressed need by family to address their barriers to access, then we are very proactive in doing that. And we actually have it as a standard process when people are being admitted to the neonatal unit or to the paediatric ward, and we actually sign it off and check that we've spoken to the parents and said, is parking a problem? And this is the process for you accessing the free parking.
Philip, we really appreciate your time, and I'm very grateful. But I have to say I don't understand a lot of what you're saying. And so, I mean, what are you saying? Do you think that after 4 hours, $20 is reasonable? Do you think that a rate of $5 per hour at 4 hours is fair in a community like the South Auckland community that Middlemore serves? And it is more, and it does kick into the high rate earlier than any other hospital in New Zealand.
I can't speak to that, John. I don't know. And what I would say is that if we're here with your family, I would like to think that we would be able to identify quickly with you the options that you would have in terms of accessing the site, and if costs were a barrier, then we would be able to talk to you about other options.
Philip Barmer, Director of Hospital Services. John Key will give his valedictory speech on Wednesday. Mr Key's kept out of the spotlight since his surprise resignation in November, but he's revealed that he signed on to be Global Brand Ambassador for the International Sports Promotion Society, which supports blind and disabled golf. Sarah Robson headed out to Kumu in Mr Key's Helensville electorate to ask locals about his legacy.
Oh, well, there's the obvious, isn't there? There's the ponytail pulling, there's the secret three-handed handshakes, there's those sort of things, but they're pretty superfluous, really, that sort of thing. I think he'll be remembered by a lot of people for sort of a lost opportunity. He had so much of a mandate, so much power, and he really didn't do a hell of a lot with it.
Most probably as a good leader. I believe that he was a good leader, yes, and I think he will be remembered for that.
He thinks of the people of the country and wants what's best for them.
His legacy will be a lot of neglect of people who need help in our society. The housing issue, I think, is appalling, especially since he grew up in the State House with all the benefits of that society then. I don't know why he forgot it.
Probably the New Zealand where it's at, like, you know, in the world financially and prestige more than, yeah.
Thinking of everybody in New Zealand, trying to help out as many people as he can.
Is there anything you think he did not so well?
Well, he left Parliament and that wasn't so good. No, I think he's been a perfect Prime Minister.
I think he's fine, yeah, but yeah, the wages it's quite low. In New Zealand, the now problem is richer getting richer and poor getting poor. So if you look after the poor people, like the who is in the minimum wage, so it would have better.
You know, as a man, I think he's probably a very pleasant man, but I don't think he's done enough for New Zealand.
Alan Clark was better than doing a better job looking after everyone, not just one set.
He could have done a lot more for women's rights, could have done a lot more for education.
More for schools. It's ridiculous that the parents have to do all the fundraising.
I think he played it sort of safe and played being popular, and no, he could have been far, far better. He could have done far more to make our society a more equal society.
No, I think he did quite well in everything, really, as much as he could do.
I just think he's turned the country around. You know, he went in at a bad time when we were going into a recession, and I just think the outcome has been amazing.
And he was approachable. You could go up and talk to him. He made himself available when he could for the people. Yeah, I've found him good. I'll miss him.
I think he's done well for us as West Aucklanders, and it's time for a rest for him so he can be with his family. And I've been very impressed with him in my time.
Oh, I just think he was fantastic. I think he was really, really good as a Prime Minister. He just seemed to, especially when the global economy went down the toilet, so to speak, and he just, New Zealand didn't seem to be too badly affected. I think that had a lot to do with the way he handled things.
I think he did a good job, yeah.
I think he did well while he was in, and good luck to him and his family. I think, you know, he deserves to move on and have a good life, you know, yeah.
The people of Helensville talking to Sarah Robson. John, the hospital parking orders all over the country. Staff are also charged but have no option but to drive because public transport does not run at usable hours for them. At least the money going to ACC stays in New Zealand.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A drug linked to birth defects in Britain was used in this country before being withdrawn in 1975. The Health Ministry and its MedSafe unit say the hormonal pregnancy test called Primidos was available in New Zealand in the 1960s and 70s. It follows reports in the UK that its medicines regulator will examine new findings about Primidos after files were discovered suggesting the British government knew in 1975 it increased the risk of malformations in newborns. The Ministry and MedSafe say documents suggest it was available and prescribed in New Zealand from 1966. They say there's no information on how many patients were prescribed the product. The British woman leading a class action against the drug company that supplied Primidos told Checkpoint she's found documents showing the company, now Bayer, trying to cover up how damaging the drug was.
It's quite apparent in the text of the letters, in the way that they try to defend through their solicitor, in the fact that they actually colluded with the Government Health Agency in the UK and with the Government Health Agency in Germany.
Marie Lyon, who took Primidos while she was pregnant. Public concern has driven the government to look more closely at the questions around exporting water and the issues around charging and ownership. Water rights campaigners presented a 15,000 signature petition to Parliament last week, calling for a moratorium on such exports. The Prime Minister, Bill English, this afternoon announced the government would ask an advisory group, part of the Land and Water Forum, to investigate the issue further.
Like who gets the charge, who gets the revenue, what the charge might be, whether you can do that legally without establishing ownership of the water. New Zealand's long-held position has been no one owns the water and no one actually pays for water. They pay for consents, they pay for infrastructure, but water in itself is free.
Bill English says no moves will be made to charge companies for water before the election. The prosecution says a man killed a 15-month-old baby after he lost control due to the effects of repeated concussion injuries. But the defence lawyer is blaming the mother. Troy Taylor's on trial at the High Court in Christchurch for assaulting and murdering Ihaka Stokes in 2015. Conan Young was in court.
The partner of the toddler's mother, Michaela Stokes. The Crown case is that a series of concussions left Mr Taylor with a short fuse and that he lost control and beat the baby unconscious. His lawyer, Philip Shammy, says before the jurors decide whether Mr Taylor was responsible, they first have to be satisfied, beyond a reasonable doubt, it wasn't Miss Stokes who inflicted the injuries. He says she was alone with the boy for 3.5 hours on the day of his death, was tired due to being heavily pregnant, and was dealing with a child with an ear infection. Michaela Stokes will be the first witness called tomorrow. In Ōtautahi, ko Konanyang tēnei.
The Accident Compensation Corporation is making $4 million a year running the car park at Auckland's Middlemore Hospital. Parking fees at the hospital are under fire after the father of a premature baby started a petition calling for the $20 fee for 4 or more hours to be scrapped. Alex Dexter spent hundreds of dollars on parking while visiting his prematurely born son, and his petition has almost 16,000 signatures. The county's Manukau District Health Board owns the car park land, but says it doesn't receive any financial benefit. ACC has the car parking concession contract and says the revenue helps cover the cost of ACC clients' treatment and rehabilitation. The Middlemore Hospital car park is the only car park that ACC runs. The Crown prosecutor in the Dome Valley kidnapping case has paid tribute to the victim and her compelling evidence that he says led to guilty verdicts for most of the charges. Nicola Jones and Julianne Torrance were today found guilty of attempted murder after earlier admitting charges of kidnapping. Michelle Blom and Cameron Hakeke were found guilty of kidnapping. The prosecutor Brian Dickey told Checkpoint several factors led to the jury's verdicts.
Probably the quality of their evidence, a very good police investigation from the O-River CIB, and a collection of other witnesses and circumstantial evidence. But look, I think the complainant's the hero of the piece.
Brian Dickey, the Crown prosecutor. The 4 are due to be sentenced next month. A Northland principal says youngsters caught up in petty crime in Kaikohe need more love and care, not a beating. Frustration over youth crime in the town has prompted the local National Party chair, Alan Price, to suggest a return to corporal punishment. But the head of Northland College, Jim Luders, says that would achieve nothing. He says Kaikohe's main problem is a lack of jobs, closely followed by drug abuse.
A lot of these kids have really tough lives, and what they actually need is some care and some understanding and lots of love. And I know people think, no, you should be doing the opposite, but the reality is they're at a vulnerable age, and if they get the proper support from the agencies, that's going to help them to get on the right path and the right way.
Jim Luders says 2 of the boys involved in Friday night's episode, when youngsters robbed a liquor store and tried to smash into a service station, attend Northland College. It's 6:05. To sport, and 3 Australian National Rugby League clubs face fines totalling more than $350,000 for breaching concussion protocols. The NRL has issued the Gold Coast Titans, St George Illawarra Dragons and the Newcastle Knights breach notices for failing to follow concussion rules during the weekend's matches. Meanwhile, the West Tigers coach Jason Taylor has been sacked just 3 weeks into the 2017 season. Tigers assistant coach Andrew Webster becomes interim coach. The All Whites newcomer Jai Ingham says giving his allegiance to New Zealand rather than Australia was an easy decision to make. The Melbourne Victory forward was born in Australia but qualifies for New Zealand through his mother. The 23-year-old Jai and his younger brother Dane, who plays for Brisbane, could both debut against Fiji at the FIFA World Cup qualifying series, which starts this weekend.
You know, it's huge, not just for me and him, but for our whole family. We have a lot of family in Australia and in New Zealand, and it's amazing to get the call up with him, and hopefully we can both get on the field at the same time, and show what we're all made of.
Jai Ingham is one of just half a dozen players who started a camp in Wellington today, with the rest of the squad arriving in the next 2 days. That's the news.
As well as coming out your wireless, Nights with Brian Crump is available online around the world, everywhere from Lagos to Los Angeles.
That's the bass crump, crump moves and the crump finishes that come. Like I say, it's a freestyle, and that means you can come up with moves, you can be creative, you can find the power of the dance, power of the crump energy.
Enter the Crump Zone, radionz.co.nz, or tune in weeknights after the news at 7. on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, cloudy periods and the odd shower. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine. Waikato to Wellington, including Taumaranui and Taihape, also wided upper. Cloudy periods, isolated showers, mainly from Taranaki northwards, clearing tomorrow morning. Nelson and Marlborough fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow with a few showers mainly about the ranges. Canterbury fine today, occasional light rain or drizzle tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain or showers clearing Fiordland overnight. Otago and Southland, showers spreading north today, then most clearing tomorrow, but light rain or drizzle remaining in North Otago and Dunedin. West or southwest gales in exposed places easing later today. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and the odd shower. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much, Katrina. MedSafe says it's urgently working through its archival files to find and establish the use of a pregnancy test pill. This was to find out whether you were pregnant in the 1960s and 70s, which may have caused severe birth defects and life-threatening abnormalities. MedSafe says the drug Primidos first appeared in the New Ethics Journal in 1966, suggesting it was available and prescribed in New Zealand from that time until May 1975, when the then Department of Health withdrew it from the market. Interestingly, it wasn't withdrawn from the UK market until 1978. We've heard from a listener tonight who did use Primidos. Pam Maudsley is just one British woman prescribed the drug. She spoke to the BBC about the damage that decision has made.
Because I thought I was pregnant. I'd never been pregnant before, so I went to the doctor and he gave me 2 tablets out of his drawer in his desk called Primidos, and he told me to take 1 today, 1 tomorrow, and if I didn't have a bleed, I was pregnant.
What disabilities was Louise born with?
Well, when she was born, she had talipes, which means her feet were twisted back to front. Anybody can have those. So I didn't think there was anything wrong with her. And it was only when she wasn't doing anything, she wasn't moving the way she should be, she wasn't reaching out, she wasn't trying to roll over. And I thought there must be something wrong. But bearing in mind that I had been going to the hospital 3 times a week for 9 months for physio on these feet to try and twist them round the right way. And nobody had mentioned anything to me about a development. And I just thought, I'm sure there's something's not quite right. And I mentioned it to the physios and they just said to me, well, why don't you get an appointment, get referred to a consultant at the hospital? Which I did. And when Lou was about 9-10 months old, I saw a consultant who told me to go away. I was a fussy first-time mother. Eventually, I had a second opinion and I was told that she had extensive brain damage. She had cerebral palsy. She was a mild spina bifida. She had something called microcephaly, which means the skull stops growing. And so the brain stops growing and it can't develop. But she's very tiny. She's only 4'10", and I'm 5'10". She only weighs 6 stone now, but she only weighed 17 pounds when she was 3 years old. Her feet are tiny. She takes a 12.5 child shoe now.
It's British woman Pam Maudsley speaking to the BBC. Now, drug pharmaceutical giant Bayer, who owns the manufacturing sharing, says the drug was not responsible for deformities in children. It says court action relating to the drug ended in 1982 when claimants against the company withdrew their litigation on the grounds they could not prove their case. Interestingly, the woman we spoke to after 5 has obtained a huge number of documents out of Germany and they are now relaunching their action. Let's turn to these verdicts in the Dome Valley case. A 19-year-old woman survived being throttled in an attempt to break her neck and at least 10 hammer blows to her head. Today, those responsible for 2 separate kidnappings of the women were convicted of the majority of the charges they faced at the High Court in Auckland. Our court reporter Edward Gay was in court for the verdicts and he joins me now. Eddie, it's lovely to have you with us as always. I don't envy you your job because there was some brutal evidence in this case. What was the reaction to the verdicts?
Well, as the jury forewoman read out those verdicts, Nicola Jones
clutched at her stomach as those verdicts were read out. And she was, the Crown said, the instigator. She was the woman at the centre of these crimes. She and Julie Torrance had already admitted kidnapping charges, but today they were found guilty of attempted murder, and that's the much more serious charge. Another defendant, Cameron Hakeke, he wept uncontrollably. He was convicted of an earlier kidnapping where he lured the victim to his West Auckland flat in Green Bay on the pretence of a drug deal. Jones and Torrance were waiting for her at that flat, and they attacked her. They used a taser on her. The victim also spoke of Torrance using a hot pea pipe to burn her leg during that attack. Michelle Blom, another defendant, she was convicted of the second kidnapping, and despite that conviction, her lawyer Julianne Kincaid asked for bail so she could attend her sister's wedding. Justice Fata declined that bail application.
Okay, Blom's conviction related to a separate kidnapping. So it was the same ongoing incident, right? But there were two separate kidnappings as the law saw it anyway.
Yeah, it was the second one came about 2 weeks later,
right?
In May last year. The victim told the court that at the time she was working as a prostitute and she was grabbed by the hair on Auckland's Karangahape Road by Jones and forced into this car. And inside the car were Torrance, Blom and another woman, Jacqueline Keats, who was actually a Crown witness at this trial. And she's pleaded guilty already. Now, the victim inside the car repeatedly assaulted, taken back to Blom's West Auckland home out in Glen Eden, where she was sexually violated. Torrance was found guilty of that charge today. For most of the following 22 hours, she was left bound and in zip ties, naked, fed the odd bit of toast, and that was it, really. And the following night, she was taken out to Dome Valley by this man, Wayne Blackett, who has pleaded guilty to his part, and that's where the violence really started.
Look, there's absolutely no doubt that they wanted to kill her, right? In fact, the victim herself even overheard them discussing this.
That's right, yeah. She overheard a conversation where she believes it was Blackett saying, we're going to do this properly, you won't get caught, we're going to hide the body. But of course the body wasn't hidden, the body was, they left the body on the side of the road.
And they thought it was a body, but in fact she'd survived.
That's right. And as we heard from Brian Dickey earlier this evening, there's evidence to suggest that they thought she was dead, that there were no signs of life. She was left for dead. But she wasn't dead. She managed to come back and give evidence at this trial. And as Mr. Dickey said, you know, she gave compelling evidence. She was able to say, for the most part, who did what to her and when. And I mean, you know, that's what really led to these verdicts today.
So it's a real wonder she survived, and it's extraordinary that they didn't roll her down the hill off the road, right? Because they were in steep and rough terrain, and she was found and survived.
I mean, it's this you know, a satellite shot of this road. It's all bush. It's bush on the side of a hill. If she had been rolled off the road, if she hadn't been found by the locals the following morning, you know, you have to remember she was in a 5-day coma after this attack. One would have to wonder how hard the police's job would have been made if that had happened, and you know, whether she would have survived and how they would have identified her if they would have been able to find her. It would have been a much more difficult case.
Sentencing next month, Eddie?
That's right, at the end of next month.
Edward Gay, who sits through all of this for us. Thank you so much, Eddie. We really appreciate it, as always. Let's head north from Dome Valley. How many police are working in Northland right now? As the repercussions of Friday night's activities by a group of young people in the far north town of Kaikohe make their way to Parliament. Winston Peters, who's the local MP, remember, is calling for an urgent increase in police numbers in the region. Now, far north communities, particularly Kaitaia, have suffered from a spate of suicides and violent crime over the past 12 months. In Kaikohe on Friday night, it was less serious, but captured on camera as youths who appeared to be very young in some cases robbed a liquor store and tried to smash the windows and glass doors of the mobile service station. No police were there at first. On Morning Report this morning, Kaikohe Community Police Patrol Coordinator Tony Taylor said only 5 police officers were working in the whole Mid-North area on Friday night. Police claimed there was 11. The New Zealand Police website lists 21 police stations in Northland, but Winston Peters says some are ghost stations, often unoccupied. We wanted to talk to the Minister about actual numbers and how stretched the region appears to be. We received an email in reply to our invitation saying in full, and I quote, "She's not available." So we called 11 of the region stations. We're phoning Hikurangi, not far north of Whangarei, and you'll hear the ringtone beneath me is about to change volume. That's the call being transferred from the Hikurangi number that's listed to the Whangarei number, and sure enough...
Good morning, Whangarei Police.
Calling the smaller police stations in the north is often an exercise in not getting through. And bear in mind, this is during business hours.
You have reached Kawakawa Police Station. If your call is an emergency, please hang up and dial 111. If you wish to speak to police now, please press 1.
And if you press 1...
Wait while I transfer your call.
Whangarei, please.
The distance between Whangarei and Kawakawa is 55k. If you continue heading west along State Highway 12, you'll eventually get to Rawini. That's 120k away. And on winding Northland roads, it's a drive of over an hour and a half.
The police station that you have called cannot answer your call at present. Please hold the line while you are transferred to Whangarei Central Police Station.
In picturesque Rawini on the Hokianga Harbour, well northwest of Whangarei, and Ruakaka to the south of Whangarei, the same phone message awaits you.
The police station that you have called cannot answer your call at present. Please hold the line while you are transferred to Whangarei Central Police Station.
Sometimes you don't even get that. Manga Toroto, where I called the number listed on the New Zealand Police website, and this is the answer I got.
Your alternative network call is unable to proceed at this time. Please try again later.
I called 11 of the police stations listed in Northland in the far north. 3 were answered by someone who was physically there. The other 8 were either transferred to Whangarei, simply not answered at all, or I could leave a message.
Bristol Police Station. Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or press hash for more options.
Now, as we said, this is a discussion of resources, and resources are the Minister's domain, but Checkpoint, unfortunately, isn't the Minister's domain, and she declined to appear on it, as she usually does. Instead, we talked to Mid-Far North Area Commander Inspector Al Simons, who's on the ground and has no say over resources. He says small community stations that don't answer their phone may be a sign that the police officers are out working in their communities, and that would be a good thing, and he says they do the best they can with their resources, including in Kaikohe on Friday night.
I can't wait for the cavalry to come over the hill. I have to do the best with what I have. And as I've said, we put a fair amount of work and thought into how we actually do deploy our staff.
Ideally, how many more police do you need in the entire Northern region to cope with the demands of Fridays and Saturday nights, communities that are isolated and quite far apart, and also the on-the-ground community policing that everyone except Northland needs more of?
The nature of rural policing means that all of our staff effectively are community police officers. A lot of us, we live in this area, we police in this area, we know the people. It's not my place to comment on a figure or a number on what we would like or what we will get. My place to comment is the staff we do have are dedicated. They work really hard, and we do put a fair amount of thought into where we send them. We're looking for more too. We're trying to recruit from our local areas as well. We'd like to get people from Kaikohe, Kaitaia, Kirikiri, Paihia, and Kahukahu, Rawini, Mangatoroto, all into the police as well to help out. It's not my place to put a number on that. All I can say is that as we come to work, we're lucky to police in Northland. It's a great place. It's a great place to live, great place to grow up. And I guess that's all I can say.
Yes, and I'm listening to you and I'm smiling and I'm thinking what a wonderful man to have on the ground. But let's pretend you're not being interviewed on Radio New Zealand, and let's pretend this isn't on the radio. Let's pretend I'm the police minister calling and saying, hey, Alan, what do you need? What would you respond?
What would I respond to that? I can't comment on figures, resources. This is what we need. What I do need is more people from our local community to come and join us. So I need more people who grew up in Kaitaia or Kahukahu or wherever to come and work with us going forward, because we want to reflect our community and those sort of community links. And as I've said, the nature of rural policing means that we know the people, we know the areas, and those sorts of community links are invaluable.
Inspector Alan Simons, obviously he can't speak about resourcing, but he says with the resources they have, they are certainly doing the best that they can in the far north. The University of Auckland's central campus was plastered with posters depicting what are being described as white supremacist views. This morning, a group called the Western Guard has put up posters asking people to join the fight against white genocide, while its website says homosexuals, transsexuals or others with mental illness are not allowed to join. Now, we know nothing about this group and don't know whether it is what it purports to be or this is some other kind of stunt. Jessie Chang reports.
The president of the University of Auckland Student Association, Will Matthews, says the slogans typically align with white supremacist sentiments and the requirements to join are appalling.
We have looked into it and we're pretty confident that this doesn't represent any kind of group that is organising on campus and more just a few angry students with fringe views who have decided to plaster those views all over the university.
Will Matthews says the university has asked security guards to remove the posters. It is unclear who is behind the Western Guard group. Some Auckland University students say the posters are racist and they do not belong in the multicultural university.
It kind of promotes bad behaviour, racist behaviour, and that's not, what freedom of speech is about.
You shouldn't promote them around public places or campus, so no, I don't think this is ethically correct.
However, others said freedom of speech means groups like these should be allowed to promote their message.
I guess it's fine for them to put up posters wherever they want as long as it doesn't upset anyone else too much.
If that's what people think, they're free to say that. If people want to also follow that, it's okay for them to think that.
The university says in a statement it is investigating the posters and whether they breach university policies. For Checkpoint, Ko Jessie Chang Aho.
Coming up to 6:25, you are with Checkpoint. We're going to end tonight with some sport. The concussion debate has been reignited in Australia after two incidents at the weekend in which rugby league players appeared to receive serious head injuries but when formally assessed and were allowed to keep playing. If you've seen the footage, you will be... Well, I'm not judging for you, but I was taken aback. In one of the games, Newcastle Knights fullback Brendan Elliott was down for several minutes but was only removed from the field after a second heavy knock later in the game. Experts say he was clearly concussed and shouldn't have kept playing. They've also pointed to new Australian research which shows a significant difference between the brains of former NRL, that's league players, and men of a similar age with no history of concussion. With more, here's the ABC's Lucy Carter.
The first hit on Knights fullback Brendan Elliott came about 25 minutes into the first half against Souths.
The vision says it all. And now Brendan Elliott probably has double vision.
No doubt he'll probably have to go for a concussion test here, so this will...
However, Brendan Elliott wasn't given a head injury assessment and was allowed to play on. 20 minutes into the second half, he went down again.
It's officially enough for Brendan to be a sick boy. He goes off under the head injury assessment rule.
Souths player Sam Burgess wouldn't be drawn today on whether he thought it was the right call, but he says he's taking head knocks more seriously than he used to.
I had a knock on the weekend, I was fine. I went off to do a head test. So last year I would have stayed on the field. This year I went off and did a head test, passed it and came back on. So that was my medical staff's advice. And that's what we do at our club.
Neuroscientist Dr Alan Pearce from La Trobe University reviewed the footage of Brendan Elliott's first head injury for The World Today.
Well, I was pretty surprised that they would allow him to stay on after the first impact because he was obviously concussed, because when he fell, you could actually see that he wasn't trying to guard himself when you put your hands out. He was already obviously had effects of concussion before he actually even hit the ground.
The NRL is also examining a second weekend incident involving Dragons player Josh Dugan, who went down after being elbowed in the jaw. After the game, Dragons coach Paul McGregor defended the decision to keep Dugan playing, saying it was his jaw, not a head injury. Dr Pearce says that defies logic.
Well, I guess when I did my anatomy, jaw was part of the head, and we know that with any sort of repetitive head injury, you don't have to have a direct hit to the head to have effects of concussion. Even indirect hits to the head that can very violently move the brain can affect the neurons or the cells of the brain underneath the skull.
NRL rules around concussion were changed in 2015 and state that players must undergo a head injury assessment if they're suspected of having a concussion. That didn't happen with either Dugan or Elliott. Dr Pearce says evidence is growing that repeated concussions to players have a long-term effect. He's just completed a study comparing 25 former NRL players aged in their 50s to 25 men of a similar age.
What I was looking at is what are the effects of repetitive head injuries over many years? What sort of effect does that have later in life? So I had 25 former professional NRL players come in and be tested for cognitive tests like memory and attention, some motor tests like reaction time and fine dexterity, and then looked at those tests in relation to a technique that I use called transcranial magnetic stimulation, which stimulates the brain and we get a response. And what I found was that the responses of retired rugby league players was significantly different to the healthy controls with no history of head injury. And that also correlated to the tests of cognition and motor reaction time that were significantly worse.
The study is timely, given a lawsuit lodged last month by ex-NRL player James McManus. He's suing his former club Newcastle over its handling of his concussions. Dr Alan Pearce says he believes this lawsuit may be just the tip of the iceberg. Dr Pearce will be presenting his new study next week in the US at the 12th World Congress of Brain Injury.
Lots of feedback coming in. Just before we go to that was the ABC's Lucy Carter. We just want to add to that story. The NRL has just announced that both the Knights and the Dragons have been fined, wait for this, $100,000 for each concussion breach after the two incidents mentioned in that report. It says they are the heaviest fines ever proposed for such breaches, and it's a signal of how seriously the NRL is taking the concussion issue. Look, NRL, that Newcastle Knights Brendan Elliott thing, well, $100,000 seems apt for me as a fine. Certainly an incentive to not do that again. Pip's just passed in feedback. Sam on driving and car parks at hospitals. It's stressful enough travelling to hospital to see a sick child, friend or partner without exorbitant parking fees being charged. Many people need to visit sick loved ones over multiple times, not just over several days or even weeks, but often repeatedly in a day. Visitors ought not to have to worry about parking affordability and how long they've been parked and whether they need to leave, nor should they be put off the number of visits they make because of costs. I suspect, though, that the extortionate charges at Middlemore are more about dissuading large numbers of Māori and Pacific Islanders visiting one patient in groups, which is usual for these ethnic groups. Regardless, it's wrong. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
News headlines at 6:30. A drug linked to birth defects in Britain was used in this country before being withdrawn in 1975. Public concern has driven the government to look more closely at the questions around exporting water. Middlemore Hospital is defending its car park contract with the Accident Compensation Corporation that earns the ACC $4 million a year. And the Crown Prosecutor in the Dome Valley kidnapping case has paid tribute to the victim and her compelling evidence that he says led to guilty verdicts for most of the charges against the group involved. More news and weather at 7.
Coming up on Upbeat on RNZ Concert, weekdays at 1. Iconic Wellington group The Beat Girls on why they can't stop the beat after 21 years. How does Gareth Farr's new opera The Bone Feeder stack up at the Auckland